Now, I hope some of you have heard this proverb in the past. It's one that I don't even know what origin there is to this one, but the idea of this series is to kind of come up with these sort of pithy sayings that help you understand how long that we've actually been thinking about toxic relationships. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. I hope you find this video and all the others helpful, and please consider joining this amazing community by hitting that subscribe button. You can also hit that bell, turn on the notifications, and that way you're told every day when a new video comes out, which means every day you are up to date on what you need to know on how to manage the narcissist in your life. So let's go back to that. You can't unring a bell. Now, interestingly, the origin of the more regular use of this phrase was actually from courtroom procedures, and the challenge that comes when you ask a jury to ignore something that was raised in the courtroom, but is not supposed to be brought into the consideration of the verdict, right? So someone brought in something, the judge says, no, strike that, but now it's hard because the jury's heard it, right? So it's this acknowledgement that it's hard not to see it or not to have heard it or to unring the bell after something's presented in court. Now, other usages of this phrase include not being able to undo something that has been said or that has already happened. And this idea of not being able to unring a bell is a core principle of making sense of narcissistic relationships. Frankly, it's a useful proverb for understanding the dynamics of these relationships. The reason that these relationships persist are the cognitive dissonance and the justifications that go along with that, as well as the pressure to forgive, to give second chances and things like that. Anything to kind of keep it going, right? If I had $1 for every time I have heard or have shared or have been shared, I should say, stories about the narcissist who has said or done something that's impulsive or impulsively said something or something that's hurtful, and saying like, oh God, all right, so I said it. Can't we just forget that and put it behind us? No, actually we can't. We can't put that behind us. Why? You can't unring a bell. Now, please drop a comment here if a narcissist ever asks you to just, oh, can't you just forget about that thing I said? How did that feel for you? Were you able to unring that bell? Now, when I invoke this proverb in helping people navigate the waters of narcissistic abuse, I use it to remind people that the thing that was said or that was done, it can't be unsaid or undone. I don't care if the person who said it was drunk or high or angry or triggered or frustrated or scared. It was said and it was done and it is not okay. And that event, that thing they said, whatever it is, it becomes a piece of data. Now it's something you know about that person, something you know that that person is capable of. And you file that away, and that means you can have more realistic expectations. Now, knowing this doesn't mean you have to go file for divorce or end a relationship or delete your friend's contact information or stop going to a holiday dinners with your family or quit your job. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is that the narcissistic person can't just magically erase what they did or said, nor should you forget it. If you learn something about them from what they said. To me, this saying brings us back to the world of realistic expectations, that you cannot just conveniently scrub the things that were said or done, but you have to sadly integrate them. Recognize that this person does gaslight, or they do lie, or they cheat, or they do shady stuff, or they manipulate, or they have poor boundaries, whatever the issue or issues are that were brought up by their behavior or their words. That you've basically been allowed to peer behind the door and see a little or even a lot of what is really there. It may mean that you won't and probably shouldn't trust them as readily. You're always told, right? If you have a problem with someone, start from that healthy place of communicating. But if that tanks, which it always is going to tank if you try to communicate with a narcissistic person, then it's time for radical acceptance. And there isn't likely to be much listening or growth in this relationship. Now, in all narcissistic relationships, the cycle of volatility, arguing, ending the relationship, apologies, starting the relationship again, it's all part of the classical landscape of these relationships. So many people going through these cycles will say, well, here we are, we're off to a bright new start together. I wish I could just do that kind of spotless thing to my mind or have my memory erased so we can just start from scratch and forget any of those bad things were said and done. No, you actually don't want to be able to wipe away your memory because narcissism is lots of things. But one of the most consistent things that it is that it's consistent. Narcissism is not a pattern that's amenable to change. And the things that narcissistic people did to you before, they're going to do them again. The lack of empathy and the lack of self-reflection means that they do not learn from their mistakes, and you're not important enough to them to learn from them. And this is why a relationship with a narcissistic person feels like that movie Groundhog Day. Every day you wake up, and it's the same kind of mistakes, right? And it's why these relationships are so heartbreaking, because you can be so vulnerable and trusting and beg and wish and hope that the person would change, and they don't change. And then you are once again believing that they will change because they future faked and they said they would change. And there you are right back at the beginning, and the same thing happens again. And then, as often happens in narcissistic relationships, you wonder if it's you that's the problem, rather than seeing it is the other person. Now, if you can remember just this simple truth that you cannot unring a bell, you can learn from this proverb. Maybe you can learn to be less vulnerable with this person. Maybe you learn that this relationship is just a superficial placeholder, maybe a person to have dinner with from time to time, but it's never going to be a place of depth. Once a narcissistic person cheats on you once, it's likely to happen again. If this is the case, then it's time to ask yourself, are the other parts of this relationship worth it to you? And are you willing to look the other way on, for example, their infidelities, instead of harboring the unlikely hope that they will discontinue their behavior? Only you know the answer to that. Only you know what's right for you. If they gaslight you, you can't unring that. Their gaslighting is a wake-up call to get well acquainted with your reality and foster other sources of support that allow you to hold on to that reality. And please, let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment here. How did realizing and recognizing that the bell cannot be unrung change the landscape of your relationship with the narcissistic person? Did this recognition change what you expected from the narcissistic person, or how vulnerable you allowed yourself to be in this relationship? Now, there's sort of this obsessive quality for forgiveness, right? We're obsessed with forgiveness, especially in toxic relationships. And this obsession with forgiveness pervades the online relationship website world, the inside of many counselors' offices, pastoral and religious spaces, and feel-good Instagram accounts. This paradigm of forgiveness is often based on ignoring those rung bells. You know my position on this. I am not a supporter of rushed or forced forgiveness. Some people get there to forgiveness, some people don't. Either is fine. Never feel the pressure to forgive on other people's schedule. And even if you never get to forgiveness, I truly believe you absolutely, yes, you can heal from this. Listen, this whole idea of you can't unring a bell is a two-way street. If we screw up, we have to accept that people may edit, alter, or revise their impressions of us. Then, our empathy means that we pay attention to what has happened and we learn from it and we do the work. We don't just ask the other person to forget this ever happened when we do something wrong. We learn. We don't do it again. We address it, and we change our behavior, and we sustain that change. Over time, it's not that the bell gets unrung. It's that the new bells that get rung are good bells and compassionate ones, and they are aware and mindful, and our awareness and healthier behaviors are what reshape people's perception of us, not just a snap of the fingers asking them to unring the bell. We earn that regard again. You can't unring a bell. And when we try to cordon off or justify or deny those rung bells, it's a recipe for getting stuck in a toxic relationship and falling into spaces where growth does not happen and you keep making the same mistakes, falling for the future faking and impeding your own growth and mental health. So again, I'm Dr. Ramani. Thanks so much for tuning in and making it all the way to the end of this video. See? Now you don't have to worry about unringing that bell. You rang the bell all the way through. I hope this means you liked this video and that you found this helpful. Please consider giving it a thumbs up if you did. And as always, your comments and your feedback help this channel not only to keep growing, but for us to make this channel better all the time and more responsive to the topics that people want to hear about and enjoy. Thanks again.